Alice, for that warm and wonderful introduction, and I'm sure she's the only one who will ever introduce me as having splinters that need to be talked about, and it made me laugh even before you did. So really, thank you so much for this lovely setting, Wilderbee and its owners, for Catherine and her team of volunteers for keeping this going. I would love to join. Catherine, I'll talk to you later. I have some things like a place where poets can stay. I didn't know that was needed. I'm really glad to learn that. And I'm really happy to be reading to you. So I'm going to start by reading from this book, which is the book that really does travel through grief. However, part of the traveling through grief is also regaining joy and humor and living. And so because we're in a beautiful, beautiful setting, I hope to emphasize that. Because when I was suffering the loss of my son, the only thing I wanted to do was grow plants. And I had a balcony full of plants. I was living in Los Angeles. I could not stop buying them, and it made me feel good. And yesterday I was in my own garden here with a friend who recently lost her husband. And for those minutes that we were out there in the garden collecting vegetables, talking about how they grow, what to do with them, we were in a different world, not a world of grief. And it was really very pleasant. So that said, I'm going to start with a poem called Huntress, which I gathered together from a start that I made years ago when I was in residence poetry teacher at Tucson's Desert Museum, learning about, from the docents there, the fauna and the flora, and I learned about the great horned owl. Many years later, I was asked to contribute to an anthology that was about mean girls, people's experiences with mean girls. Well, that owl came back to me, and here we go. Huntress, have you ever seen a predator more wonderful than the great horned owl, shaggy tufts atop her head? Have you ever seen her head swiveling a bit as she looks you over, homegirl, making her point? And her point, as she perches on a snag, her eyes wide and large as our own, is that she can swallow whatever she eats whole and doesn't have to digest what isn't digestible, but throws it back up, fur and feather and bones. I was telling John Delaney, another fabulous poet who's here in the front row, that he asked me if I've been writing, and I said I am, from pieces and parts that I just didn't know what to do with years ago. So here's another memory. Well, this is the first of several memories. I'm taking you to winter, which may seem odd, but maybe some of us are hoping for it now that we've suffered some heat and smoke. In winter, after work, under the street lamp's fuzzy light, my father shoveled snow from our sidewalk steps and driveway. He refused to wear a hat, even after hanging up his executive clothes, even as his hair turned the color of his morning coffee with cream. "Bert, Bert, be careful," Mother called, window raised, flakes blowing in, as we two daughters emptied packets of Swiss Miss into cups. She worried he'd have a heart attack, excitement of their formal parties and travels ruined, the comfort of his income gone. That isn't fair, of course, because she loved him. But it is true that in those times, a husband was everything. The three of us stayed watching through the window while the kettle whistled. We wouldn't add water until he was done. Now I'm going to bravely read you a new poem that remains unpublished, but it's also a childhood memory. It's coming up. Here it is. It's called Childhood. To find a firefly in daylight, I looked on the cement rampart leading to the dank basement of our apartment building. Its thin wings, two rye seeds, side by side, below a red head, point on a colored pencil. Sometimes I braved the dark to carry one into the place of spider webs and rusty bikes, waited for its quiet belly to twitch and glow. When I brought the firefly outside to let it go, the moon surprised me with its face, full of smudges, just like mine. And I will go back to the book since then. This is a poem that I wrote very early in the pandemic. The pandemic was good for writing, writers say, because we had a lot of time and we weren't running around. And what really amazed me, as well as other people, was how quiet the world became. And this is so early, before we knew anything about masks or how it was contagious, in what ways, and what to do with ourselves. I took about a mile walk to my mailboxes from where I live in Cape George Colony. And the birdsong was really strong. And the greenery was really strong. And of course, it probably always was, but I could hear it because it was so quiet. Evening song. In the quiet, you hear the bird song that drove you once so quickly from the family dinner table to play in hours left of daylight. Hit the penny on the head, pink rubber ball you held a yard from where the penny lay on your front sidewalk, or other nights hopping big squares your friends had chalked while parents chatted, happy on porch steps. Sometimes, if the light lasted, you rode your bike to a seemingly far field, empty and full of possibility, then rode back at twilight to the comforting glow of parents' cigarettes in the coming dark. This evening you walked deserted streets, accompanied by music of those birds, so close, so far away, and noticed the muju pines in your neighbors' front yards, how thick, dark green this year's spring candles have become, pointing as they do toward the magnificent and timeless sky. And let's see. This is hard. Microphone, book, water bottle. I think I'm going to read one of my grief poems. Grief doesn't go away. I was really happy to read an article this week in something saying, no, it's not 5 stages of grief. That's a fallacy. Grief is always there. Your relationship to it changes, but you carry it with you. You change too, as we all do as we age. But it's always there, and it pops up sometimes, very acutely, and that's what this poem is about. At the All-Sea Motel, Waldport, Oregon. I walked to the motel desk to find the laundry, when in the profile of a young man talking to the clerk, I see my son, Seth, now 20 years dead. I see him in the round cut of this man's curly hair, and in the short beard that meets that hair, in the shape of his fingers and his shoulders rounding. As a lefty, he leans in to sign the motel's form. And how was that for you? My husband asks when I tell him. Are there any words for the moment that took my breath away? The back of that curly hair, exactly like my son's when he was in college? Tears usher in those words the next day. Why isn't it my son checking in with a friend for respite from the backpacking he loved? Why isn't it my son sitting on a log, gazing at seals, sunbathing on the sandbar across the way, watching 2 blue herons fishing? The moment I saw that curly, sun-tinted hair at the back of that young man's head, what did I feel? Desire. I wanted him to turn around and hug me, happy to be saying, Mom, Mom. And now to another new poem that I'm going to read to you. Although it hasn't been published yet, it's in a coming anthology of cat poems. It was read on KPTZ, where I used to have the radio program, on Phil Andrus's show called Cat in My Lap. And I, at the same time, was working towards having something to submit to that anthology, not thinking that I really wrote cat poems. And then remembering that in my older work, I had a lot of cat stuff going on, although I never thought the poems were about cats. So I wrote it in 5 parts. It was accepted into that anthology, and I named it for Phil Andrus, called Cat in My Lap, with thanks to Phil Andrus, KPTC FM host. 1. A cat must drink a lot of water to replace the water he uses to lick himself clean. A mother who has lost her son must drink a lot of water to fill the ocean of her grief. 2. My dreams have a dripping faucet, the cat lapping and lapping what he can. I return to sleep, hoping for a river and a bowl to fill. 3. After we moved houses, I sat under trumpet vines drinking espresso among business people at white tables, pollen dusting their sandwiches. In our new apartment, the cat slept, tired from so much shedding. Mornings, my cat presses his paw gently on the space between my brows. This is part 4. I wake believing he wants me to know that he is hungry, until I learn it is the Anja chakra he touches and me who hungers to see beyond the physical. 5. I sit this night at my desk, breathless at the brightness of the moon outside my window. The cat jumps to the sill, his tail merely an eyelash caught in the moonlight. So, let's see. I think, I was really, really organized a few minutes ago. Oh, here it is. Okay. So, this is one of my more fun poems. I told my daughter, who was a new professor of linguistics, now she's a tenured professor of linguistics, time goes by, that as a teacher, starting menopause, I was having trouble remembering words. So as I was teaching, I could know that the word was coming up. I was talking towards that word, but I didn't know the word anymore. I couldn't find it. So I was inventing, as I was talking, a way around that word. And I told her about that. And she said, which has now become the epigraph of my book, I'll read it, but I call the poem Finding the Word I've Been Looking For. And this is her. However long it takes you to retrieve a word is the length of time it has taken your brain to build a new passageway to it. Emily Bender, professor of linguistics. Devalue, degenerate, degrade, design, deliver, denigrate, denote, deter, detonate, detour, demise, dissuade, debark, disembark, deciduous, debunk, decline, diminish. A gap where the word I'm looking for should sit in a bottle, ready as pills, counted out by a pharmacist. I want to pay for the word. Can't afford it, it seems, for months. But oh my God, it comes. Depreciate, depreciate. I want to shout the word. Sad, but how delicious. I think you relate somehow.
Yes.
The other trick is to hope the person you're talking to knows the word you mean and tells it to you. All right, I have 2 more poems. One is called Poetry. It's about my experience with poetry. Poetry. Oh, I should back up and say I was writing columns for Writer's Digest magazine years ago now, and I was offering monthly columns. So for July, I asked people to use the Declaration of Independence as a template to write a poem. So this is my seeming independence from poetry. You have refused to come to me when I call you, or come sometimes in a fool's chiming rhymes. You have dropped phrases here and there, leaving me to find the puzzle they complete. You have distracted me from living the way others think I ought to. You have ignited desire in me when boredom was the companion I thought I preferred. You have made me cry in public, and you have left me speechless in front of students. You have come to me unbidden in the mail, on bus placards and city steps, hooking me and reeling me in until I flutter and gasp. You have made me search you out in books I've never heard of. You have made me a lover of frogs in ancient China, a collector of words I like the sound of, like anticubital. You have widened my circle of friends to old men in Chile and young girls in Greece. You have made us foreigners those closer to home who don't understand the calling. I have reminded you that I must earn a living, have asked you to wait so I can sleep, rolling away from the pad and lighted pen. I have turned my head because I was lazy, watching television or reading Sunday's parade. I have sometimes committed to organizations, hoping deadlines and databases would keep you away. Yet there are no vows that I can break with you, my fated life companion, you who sometimes comes, hidden under armor, and others naked in a waterfall, who sometimes screams afraid of light, who sometimes seems afraid of light, yet is as agile-sighted as an eagle, who is as unpluckable as a shooting star, but as harvested as pinion nuts, ethereal as the ocean's spindrift, muscular as its undertow. Thank you. And now I want to read a last poem, and it speaks to what we must do, I believe, in grief. We have to feel it, but there's something else we can do. And that, I hope, is what the poem comes to. And it begins with words from Walt Whitman's section of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. 6 months after my son's death, I chant to sing for him, after Walt Whitman. Out of daily steps and out of drives on highways, out of hours, rocky patches, and moments made of weeds, memories come. I sing the evening I visited my son and watched his friends working in the kitchen with hops and yeast and recipes downloaded from the internet. I sing the car boys they showed me topped with see-through tubes and shiny copper for reading yeast's performance. I sing their logs of sugar content and bottled batches, the way the young men sterilized the bottles they used, invited friends for harvests of oatmeal stout and porter. I sing each week they went to school between their Sunday fests. Long and deep, I mourn and wake to sing the sun to rise, to thank my son for time he spent inside my dreams. I sing, and do what he was doing, siphoning good spirit from sediment. Thank you. For my coming readers, who I'm so excited to.